Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you today.
How are you this morning, Dr. Paul?
I am doing well,
Good.
doing well. We're going to talk about a very serious problem.
Yeah.
And I want to tell you, I've been up on top of this issue for a long time. We're going to talk about, a police state here in the United States.
Yeah.
Believe it or not. Yeah, I know you believe it. But the reason that I want to point out is I've talked about this for a long time. I don't know how long ago, it's at least 10 or longer than that, I wrote an article about the coming police state. And, I went through some of the problems we had, but really emphasized some things. But the thing I remember about is somebody wrote back in, it was sort of a criticism. He says, it's not the coming police state. He thought I really understated the problem even back 10 years ago. And it is true. You can look at it for a long, long time. And of course, you can look for the seeds of it a long, long time ago, too, because there were some infractions on civil liberties from the very beginning of our Constitution.
Yeah.
We had it in wartime and Civil War and World War I and World War II. There's always been, a police-like state. Some of the police activity of the people would come and go. They'd crack down and you lost liberties. Most of the time we retrieved a significant portion of it, but less each time. And it seems to me what has happened now is an attitude has changed. People have been conditioned, and once again, we have a domestic emergency. We have a bad virus walking around there, and somebody's using it to increase the police state.
Yeah.
And this is a problem because, a few people now are speaking out against it, but they were very willing to believe whatever the government told them and what they had to do, and the majority of people still obediently following the rules and regulations, which makes no sense, and they do a lot of harm. So we're in the middle of that. But this past weekend and week, Tulsi Gabbard, did a great job. I mean, she's stronger than I ever believed she will because, she diplomatically was quite willing to come down hard on legislation proposed by Schiff, to make this war on domestic terrorism the big issue. At the same time, she talked about Biden. But they can't accuse of her of being, warmongering and trying to stir up trouble because she talks. This is dangerous sometimes to say it. Talks like a lady.
Yeah.
But but has a powerful message.
Yeah.
And so she came out and said that we better watch out. And I think later on we'll talk a little bit more about it. But there's a warning to everybody, and somebody said, the warning is getting bad, the crackdown, especially since the election and all the shenanigans going on, and the Trump people, is a lot of rioting going, that, yes, we all should be concerned, and the word was added to the concern expressed, even the libertarians ought to watch out, which I'm not sure what the point is, all that, but everybody should. And sometimes I think, that might even be a justifiable complaint, because that you have to, the libertarians aren't always the giants of protecting civil liberties. So it's something that is a big deal because, of course, one of the concerns number one concern really was in my farewell speech was, if you can't express yourself, we're in trouble, and the First Amendment is so vital because no matter what's going on, if you lose this right, and guess where the biggest attack is right now? Some people think that the biggest coup, for the radical Democrats is the fact that Twitter has cut the wire to Trump's computer. He can't tweet, and he's in anyway. But anyway, I'm hopeful on there that somebody's going to come up with something. And he won't be forgotten. Now, Tulsi, was in the campaign, did very well, but came up a little short on people covering her because the Democrats didn't like her very well. But she's out of the Congress now, but she's speaking out. and I think we're going to hear from her for a long time. And if she were here, I would congratulate her on her willingness to continue. And really, if you talk about bringing people together, it's a person like that who has principles that should apply to liberals and conservatives, and she certainly isn't hostile toward libertarians. So that's to me is the way you bring people together, and not by force and threats and putting the military troops in the Capitol and stretching the so-called news about how dangerous it is and what we have to do, terrorize the people. But the big issue now, after 9/11, it was terrorism that was the issue. Now it looks like domestic terrorism. It's there, and nobody can ever resist anything you do to try to stop the domestic terrorism, even if it doesn't truly exist, and even though the proposals are, a serious proposal to do something and recognize what the problems really are.
Yeah, and the reason we want to bring it up is that, like you say, she's been in the media. She's been several times in the media now, and she's been very strong. No one can accuse her of being a Trump partisan by any stretch of the imagination, or a Republican or a conservative. She's I would consider a progressive libertarian-ish type. But she was in several times in the media, and she's denouncing former CIA Director John Brennan, who gave an interview, and we'll play that interview because the fact checkers said that he didn't say what he said, and we have his actual words, his lips are moving, denouncing him for calling out these groups, and also denouncing Adam Schiff for his domestic terrorism bill, which coincidentally, which surprisingly, which not surprisingly, I know this is going to shock you, Dr. Paul, he actually introduced this legislation in August of 2019. And it was only since the events of January 6th that now it's given it new life. It's just like the Patriot Act. But we're going to watch a clip from Tulsi in a second. But the point that she makes about people like Brennan and Schiff, and I'm going to read a quote because it's interesting. She is not in favor of the people that stormed the Capitol. Here's what she said. She had very strong words. The people who stormed the Capitol to try to prevent Congress from fulfilling its constitutional duties were acting as domestic terrorists. But those like John Brennan, Adam Schiff, and others are also acting as domestic terrorists because they are undermining our Constitution by trying to take away our civil liberties and rights that are guaranteed to us. And she went on to say something very interesting. People like Brennan and Schiff, as compared to the rabble that were in the Capitol, they are much more powerful and thus much more dangerous when they act as domestic terrorists. So very strong statement. And let's play a short clip of her. I think she was on Tucker Carlson, where she tells the president what he can do to fix the problem. Let's listen to this for a second.
All of this just goes to further tear our country apart. And it moves towards the thing Joe Biden said in his inauguration speech that he shouldn't happen, which is a dehumanization of your opponent. And that's where his voice is so necessary right now. He is the president of this country. He delivered this speech, his voice, himself, speaking to the American people. He needs to denounce people like John Brennan and their statements, bills like the one Adam Schiff put forward, and truly speak to the American people about how we must come together.
So she's basically saying to the president, your inauguration speech, you talked about unity, the need for unity, the need to get together. You have an opportunity, Mr. President, to nip this in the bud by denouncing people like Schiff, denouncing people like Brennan, saying we're not going down the path of having a war against half the country. We are going to actually have unity. So she, in the end, has a positive message.
Yes, and she does make the difference. There were problems there, but then she consistently brought up the other side of the point. They were troublemakers too, But another bill that was passed in those days when the government or the Congress passed the Patriot Act, they established the Department of Homeland Security, put everything together more powerful. It was the arm of the police state, which I strongly opposed. And I want to read their statement just this weekend. It says this is a new issue. It says the Department of Homeland Security issues a National Terrorism Advisory System bulletin.
Yeah.
And the bulletin, sounds trying to be benign, but I think there's a lot of threats in here. I think it's fear-mongering too. It quotes, some ideological motivated violent extremists. Pretty broad, isn't it? With objection to the exercise of government authority. Boy, we're in big trouble. We're objecting all the time to the unconstitutional authority. And the presidential transition, yeah, we believe in the transition, could continue to mobilize to incite or commit violence. That kind of stuff, they were established to stop international terrorism from spreading to this country and protect us here at home. And I think that's fear-mongering and goes along with exactly what Tulsi was saying.
Yeah, it is, and it's interesting because Homeland Security has not issued a bulletin like this for a long time. And even some people on the left were saying, so now we're going back to the color-coded system of terrorism. But as you point out, if you read the bulletin, and of course they preface it as they always do, we know of no specific threats. So basically you have no information, but you're warning us that these types of people who have questions about the election, who are not happy about, and get this, if you read it, we should put a link in the end about it. If you are upset about COVID-19 restrictions, you're also potentially a domestic terrorist. So it's putting all of these people into categories and using the strength of the Department of Homeland Security against them. It really is quite a chilling and quite a threatening thing. And actually, it did come out just yesterday. So this is brand new news.
You know, the other thing that they do in Washington, and they've done it for decades, is when there's a problem or a conspiracy and there's somebody been murdered and killed, and I'm thinking of the assassinations back in the 60s.
Yeah.
But it's been going on for a long time. Is the solution is to have a commission, have a bipartisan commission, and they put them together, and it may well be bipartisan, but it's bipartisan like using Mitt Romney for the Republican side of these issues. So it's just a gimmick they use, but the commission is to study it. And over the years, I've argued the case that the commissions are there to cover up mistakes. And certainly when you look at the Kennedy Commission and all that went on there. But now people are saying that's what we need. Well, we don't need that. We need some truth tellers. We need some good journalists, which we're starving for. So, and we need people like Tulsi that is not frightened away and locked into. If let's say she was typical, I have a future. I did pretty well. I want to be senator, and I better just shift over here a little bit to get closer to the Democrats. No, she's saying they're alike, and that's what people will admire about her.
Yeah, I think so. And when I wanted to look back and see what Brennan said, John Brennan, former CIA director, very partisan Democrat, look at what he said, because Tulsi called him out, as we say. I went back and tried to look at it. I just did a little Google search, and the first thing you see are 150 fact checkers. Brennan didn't say libertarians are a threat, didn't say PolitiFact, not a threat, he never said, never happened. So I finally found the actual clip, his own lips moving, and I think we should watch this because you can judge for yourself whether Brennan is calling these people out or whether it's all fake news, as PolitiFact and the others say. Let's listen to Brennan.
That the members of the Biden team who have been nominated or have been appointed are now moving in laser-like fashion to try to uncover as much as they can about what looks very similar to insurgency movements that we've seen overseas, where they germinate in different parts of the country and they gain strength, and it brings together an unholy alliance frequently of religious extremists, authoritarians, fascists, bigots, racists, nativists, even libertarians. And unfortunately,
even libertarians, unless my hearing is gone, we're categorized with religious extremists, authoritarians, fascists, bigots, racists, and nativists.
And even
libertarians. So who's going to fact check the fact checkers?
That's such a shame, because it becomes the conventional wisdom on how you find the enemy. You just name them, and then it's just this cancel thing. Yeah. I can't imagine it being so effective. They say, well, he's out, he just lost reputation with us, and we stamped him such. And all of a sudden, everything he does dries up. He loses his job, and he can't go on. And business people go along with it, not because they're really insider, is that they just are scared to death of their own shadow. But you know, there's this one big issue here, because some of us, including me, that we were hopeful that Parler would, substitute and come in. There were some people who worried about it from the beginning.
Yeah.
I just worry about it generally because I think the government never lets us get away with liberty solving some of our problems. But anyway, one of the bad guys came up, and you may know the names and all, but the guy came up and he said, this was good, because it's just garbage. You know what they were putting on there. Of course, Parler was putting on the stuff that the other people called garbage, and they're the ones who did it. But then he made the point that that he went and the individual went and studied Amazon's web service. And I don't know if you saw that, but the stuff that they carry, I mean, the pornography and everything else that he was saying, they have it on there, and that is never touched.
Sure.
And the pornography is people who talk about liberty or libertarianism. Yeah, that's the one that they want to lock down on us and censor.
Well, what's interesting is talking about libertarians, even in the Homeland Security thing, it talks about people who are questioning the state are potential threats. And Brennan is echoing this in what he says. So people that are not going along with the program, and what is the program? Well, these are people that have different political views. They want a huge state, they want a huge government, they want a lot of foreign wars. And so anyone that opposes that is potentially a terrorist. Well, the other thing that's interesting, Dr. Paul, and we're going to present a real bipartisan group for peace and liberty, is that Thomas Massie was on Tucker Carlson's show last night. And he was very good because he talked about the seemingly endless occupation of D.C. with troops. And Tucker Carlson asked, why aren't any Republicans saying, why are there troops here in D.C.? And actually, if we have that clip, let's watch a little bit of this from last night.
Invade Iran or whatever. Why has nobody stood up and made the obvious point? This is about political power. The troops in our country's capital. Please make them leave immediately. Why aren't Republicans saying that?
Well, this may be the next forever war. Look, 9/11 was used as the pretext to grab civil liberties and to deploy troops around the globe when they're still not back, and they do need to come back. But now we've got more troops deployed in our nation's capital than we do those two countries.
He makes a good point that after 9/11, we started a forever war overseas on terrorism. And now after the so-called events of January 6th, which are equivalent to the 9/11, they tell us, we're starting a forever war here in the U.S. against American citizens.
We're being warned, and Tulsi's absolutely right. We should all be warned and aware of what's going on, and it's moving quickly, and it's getting worse. But there's a few people that have been sitting in prison for a long time. People like Ed Snowden and Julian Assange, I imagine they think the police state is here already. What about the enforcement of the drug laws?
Yeah.
How many people ended up in prison over those many years? And yet, the thing is, everything's turned on its head, because if we're going to have a responsibility for a police, being available, they're supposed to do something about the vicious violence, the burning down of a city and the breaking of windows and crashing the cars and all this. But no, that's prohibited, or they're part of the program, and they don't do anything to stop it. But if some of them have been put in prison and convicted of a violent crime, there are some people in government and close to the president right now that actually raise money to release them from prison. So I guess the police state does better when you release vicious criminals and make sure that Edward Snowden is in prison where he can't tell us the truth. That to me is a serious problem, because we have to get the information. That's why we need more truth tellers out there. We need people to come out and let us know what's going on. And it's risky, there's no doubt about it, because of, they might get stamped that they'll be canceled.
Yeah.
Canceled, see ya, you're done.
The other thing that Thomas Massie said on Tucker Carlson that's interesting about these troops in D.C., and it is a very good point. He essentially said that the troops are staying there to keep up the pretext, to keep up this basically false idea that Trump supporters are ready to storm the city. The threat continues. We have to stay here through the impeachment trial because they're going to come. Here they're coming. They're coming. And basically, what it sounds like is they want to give the perception of a threat where no threat exists because they're desperately trying to salvage this increasingly absurd show trial where you don't even have the Chief Justice presiding. You're trying to get someone out of office who's not in office, and the whole thing is falling apart. They're desperately trying to salvage it. So what do? We better keep the troops there to make people think that, yes, the threat is real, Trump is a real threat, and we got to get rid of him.
This also might be a reflection because their efforts and they're stirring up this hysteria over the coronavirus might be, maybe that's wearing out because people are resisting to the tune of thousands now are resisting, and they'll say enough is enough and they don't want to wear the mask, especially when the studies come out and people are presenting from reputable university investigators and just saying, you're worse off wearing these masks. And of course, people will say, you guys don't care. We know we care.
Well, if we want to move on to talking about coronavirus, I had just a little clip that I was going to put up, Dr. Paul, because we do this occasionally, and we haven't done it in a while, but I came across this morning. Really, really interesting comparing. Now, Israel is a fascinating case study because it's a small country, it's a small population, and they've been very, very strictly locked down. Let's if we have this clip, let's put it up because it's really interesting. Dr. Eli David put this up. Israel, 1+ month strict lockdown, school closure, business closure, movement restricted to 1,000 meters from home, border closure, mask mandate. And then Sweden, no school closure, no business closure, no movement restrictions, no border closures, no mask mandate. Well, Israel should be doing fantastic, and Sweden should be a basket case. Well, if you look at new confirmed cases of COVID-19 in Israel and Sweden on a 7-day rolling average, the story is a little different. Sweden had a winter flu season, you see that blip, and then they came right back down to pre-winter flu season numbers. Israel, meantime, doing all of these strict measures, is a basket case.
They put a lot of stuff on TV, most of it's propaganda, but wouldn't it be, much more interesting if this Main Street media would come up and get people who, would disagree with that statement saying, Israel's doing a great job and their defenses are good and all this kind of stuff. And to present this to them and ask somebody in a serious manner, why is it that you wouldn't accept this? Not even saying, I don't like to say, and we don't even approach it that way, that you guys are wrong and we are right and therefore you have to do it. Just why would you not give them credibility instead of trying to punish people like that? And they literally are punished. They lose jobs and everything else if they come up with it. You certainly lose access to Twitter. You lose your liberty. It's part of the police state that happens. But the questions aren't asked like that, and that's more or less what Edward Snowden does. He asks the question, and he wants other people to ask it. He presents the evidence, and do they debate him or anything? Oh no. That would violate national security. For our government to do all this, that protects national security. But to allow a discussion of what Edward was presenting to us in open, well, that's a threat to our national security. Yeah, sure.
Well, I'm done. I'm closed. I just wanted to show that chart, Dr. Paul. So if you can go ahead and close up if you
Well,
want.
you did good. So I want to thank our viewers today very much for tuning in, because I think the whole issue of the police state is going to be around a long time. And the only thing that'll stop it is the people getting sick and tired of it. Just like right now, we're seeing more and more people getting sick and tired of the lockdown. And people are getting sick and tired of what's going on in the schools. And there is some now exposures of who's leading the charge on demanding that these schools stay closed. And it's not the parents, and it's not the kids. The kids want to go back. The parents want the kids back. People want their education. So this is I think a good sign. But the politicians are still very resistant, because power doesn't come with allowing more liberty. That eliminates power. And that's why most people that I ever met in Washington, they're looking for power. They look for money too, but it's a combination of both. Some say they commit fraud and they literally steal, and they use the government to make more money, and some of them do. But the big theft is doing the programs. It's done by the government with guns. They come and take trillions of dollars, and if they don't have enough money, they print it. And this is where the real violence is, and it's the way they spend the money. They spend the money, to go to war overseas and kill people. And they spend money in the military-industrial military complex to have weapons that they don't need and don't want, and will cause more trouble. So that's where the real violence is. And the other violence, a lot of the local violence, you need immoral people. But you need immoral people not only to not hurt their neighbors, but you need immoral people to prevent and resist the violence that governments permit. And of course, we could start off with making sure that we're allowed to say what I just said, that government can be very violent against the people. And what we want is truth. This is one reason why you wanted Tulsi on today, because we believe she is seeking the truth and doing her best to expose the government for what they're doing and moving this police state along. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.